If you want to become a better thriller writer, you have to read thrillers. That probably sounds obvious, but I don't think it's enough to simply enjoy a book. I think every great novel has something it can teach you. I'm Jake Winters, I've written 2 crime thrillers, and over the years there are a handful of books that completely changed the way I think about storytelling. Today I want to share 5 thriller novels that I think every aspiring writer should read. Not because they're necessarily the greatest thrillers I've written, but because each one teaches us a different lesson about writing. If I had to recommend one modern crime thriller for aspiring writers to study, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo would probably be it. On the surface, it's a murder mystery, but that's not what makes it special. What impressed me most is how patient the novel is. It spends a surprising amount of time building its characters before the mystery really takes over. We get to know Michael Blomkvist, we get to know Lisbeth Salander. We understand how they think long before they become partners in the investigation. As writers, it's tempting to rush into the action because we're afraid readers will get bored. This book is a great reminder that if readers genuinely care about the characters, they'll happily follow them almost anywhere. It's also a masterclass in atmosphere. The isolated Swedish setting almost becomes another character, creating tension even when nothing dramatic is happening. Yes, I included another Swedish novel here. That's because the Swedes are just so damn good at crime thrillers. The author, Henning Mankell, does something in Faceless Killers that I absolutely love. He shows police work as slow, frustrating, and deeply human. Detective Kurt Wallander isn't a superhero. He gets things wrong. He gets tired. He misses clues. Sometimes the investigation seems to stall completely, and that's exactly why it feels believable. One lesson this book taught me is that realism doesn't make a mystery less exciting. Sometimes it actually makes it more compelling. Watching investigators slowly eliminate possibilities, chase dead ends, and gradually piece together the truth can be just as gripping as a story full of constant action. If you're writing detective fiction, this is one of the best examples I've found of how to make police work feel authentic without sacrificing suspense. Now, you might be wondering why I'm including 1984 on a thriller list. Technically, it's dystopian fiction, but it's also one of the most psychologically suspenseful books I've ever read. I remember the first time I read 1984. It's a decent-sized novel, about 88,000 words. I read the entire book in one sitting, and I am not a fast reader. That's because the story totally captivated me. I couldn't wait to see what happened next to Winston Smith, and if he would make it out of this dystopian nightmare alive. George Orwell creates tension without relying on murders, car chases, or explosions. Instead, he builds suspense through fear, surveillance, and uncertainty. The entire novel revolves around one terrifying question: what happens when you can never truly be alone? As writers, this book teaches us that suspense isn't only about physical danger. Sometimes it's about anticipation. It's about creating an atmosphere where readers constantly feel that something terrible is just around the corner. That's a lesson that applies to almost every thriller, regardless of the setting. This one should come as no surprise, as Dexter is one of my favorite shows of all time. Darkly dreaming Dexter fascinates me because it completely flips the usual crime novel on its head. Instead of following the detective, we follow the killer, or at least someone who thinks of himself that way. What's brilliant is that Jeff Lindsay somehow makes Dexter both disturbing and strangely sympathetic. Not because we approve of what he does, but because we understand how he thinks. His internal narration is so unique that you can't help but become invested in his perspective, even while recognizing how deeply unsettling it is. One of the biggest lessons I took from this novel is that readers don't have to like your protagonist. They simply have to understand them. If readers can see the world through a character's eyes, even someone deeply flawed, they'll keep turning the pages. Michael Connelly is one of the best writers I have ever read when it comes to pacing. This book moves. The Lincoln Lawyer gives you just enough to turn the page while keeping you hungry for more. Every chapter gives you another reason to keep reading, but what I admire most is how information is revealed. Connelly rarely dumps exposition onto the reader. Instead, he answers one question while quietly creating two more. Every revelation naturally leads to another mystery. That's what keeps the story moving. Great thrillers aren't driven by action alone. They're driven by curiosity. Readers keep reading because they need to know what's coming next. And The Lincoln Lawyer is one of the best examples of that technique I've ever encountered. There are thousands of great thrillers out there. These just happen to be 5 that had a huge impact on me as both a reader and a writer. Each one taught me something different. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo taught me about character development and atmosphere. Faceless Killers showed me how realism can make an investigation more compelling. 1984 demonstrated the power of psychological suspense. Darkly Dreaming Dexter proved that even deeply flawed protagonists can captivate readers. And The Lincoln Lawyer is a masterclass in pacing and revealing information. As writers, I think we should read with 2 different mindsets. First, as readers. Second, as students. Every great novel is teaching you something if you're paying attention. If you're a writer, what's one thriller that changed the way you think about storytelling? I'd love to add more books to my reading list, so let me know in the comments. If you enjoy videos about crime fiction, writing, storytelling, and following my journey as an indie author, I'd love to have you subscribe. I'm Jake Winters, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.